Hey everybody, sorry we are coming on just a little bit late. If you can tell, I am a little bit pixelated and my camera keeps blocking out. So if I disappear, you have three other lovely ladies, hopefully, that will continue to be on for us. We're just going to do some quick introductions. Welcome everybody. We're so glad you're here. Just a little bit of an introduction of what we're doing today is just end of Preptober. NaNoWriMo is just around the corner, and ready or not, it's going to be here. And so we thought it would be really fun to go ahead and do a live Q&A panel from people that have experience finishing novels, participating in Nano, running sprints, and this sort of thing. So if you are not a member of our Heart Breathing's writing community and you're not following all of our guests today, I have all of our links in the description box below, and you can go follow everybody because they're going to be doing lots of live streams throughout the month of November and then continuing on. We're doing them all the time. So we're just going to kind of go around starting with Rhiannon and let everyone introduce themselves. And here we go. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon. I do night owl sprints in the Heart Breathings group and on my YouTube channel. I'm at this point multi-published and just a weird little witch chick hanging out online.
Okay, Lisa.
And I'm Lisa, or Little Forest Homes over on YouTube. And I am like Rhiannon, I sprint in the night owl time slot and into the Facebook group as well, of course. And I have been doing Nano since about 2018 officially, but I lurked for a while. And I've also helped my kids go through the youth program a couple of times. So a few different experiences. I've won a couple times, but mostly just give it my best.
All right, Melissa.
And I'm Melissa, Power Play Press over on YouTube, and I am hailing in from Canada today. I am not a night owl sprinter, though I do my evening pajama sprints on Wednesdays as well as my 3 hours on Sundays. And we have all kinds of fun in my sprints. And I have done Nano since 2019 was my first. I am also multi-published as well.
So our live stream should be about an hour, I think. We're going to just kind of see how it flows. And of course, if I disappear, hopefully everybody else will be around. And Renee is in the comments as Team Sarah, kind of answering some questions there for you as well. So I did ask some questions over, or asked for people to submit questions over on Instagram. So I'll probably pull some of those up. In terms of my Nano experience, I always kind of forget exactly what year I started, but I think this will be my 14th year doing Nano. And I have some wins, some massive, like, I won't say failures, but I will say shortcomings in terms of like years where I hoped to write 50K and wrote more like 3K. And those are okay too, you know, and we just do the best we can. And the more you do them, the more you start to understand that it really doesn't, you know, make or break your whole life if you win Nano, but it can just be a fun accomplishment as well. Somebody did tell me too that Scrivener's price is going up. And so one of the things that you can win, usually, I don't know if it'll be one, it's probably not just you, Seko. But one of the prizes usually is 50% off Scrivener. So that can be a really good one as well. So I may be freezing, but if you guys can still hear me, let me know. Because like I mentioned at the beginning, it's just my internet connection, and it'll be a miracle if I stay on the whole time. But as long as you can hear me, that's going to be good. So if you have any questions that you want to ask of anybody specifically on the panel, you can say their name, or you can, if you just want to ask everybody, then just go ahead and ask in general questions and we'll start pulling them up. And these can be just general writing questions if you'd like, or they can be Nano specific. But we'll get started by asking, Camilla says, Nano Rebel tips. After finishing your current draft, should you start a new one to write the 50K, or should you start editing? Anybody have any suggestions on this?
I do.
Go for it.
It depends on whether or not you're on a deadline. Like, are you trying to get that published right now? Because if you are, edits all the way. If not, then yeah, go for the new one.
Anybody else have anything different to say? So yeah, so if you're on a deadline, start those edits, get it moving, especially if you have a pre-order or something big coming up, or you just really wanted to get it done. But yeah, NaNoWriMo, I know people that do short stories and blog posts and poetry and just do nothing but edits the entire month. So if you don't have a specific deadline and you feel inspired to start book 2, or you really wanted to write a short story, go for it and just keep moving forward. I think those are good tips. Okay, let's see. How to make sure, so this is Tina04, how to make sure you're not just putting words on the page to hit your count instead of writing good words. This is kind of a tricky one, I feel like, because some people, it is all about just getting the words down and you can edit them later. So Melissa, do you have any insight about that?
Yeah, I would say that like having at the very least an outline going in. So then that way you aren't just regurgitating onto the keyboard and, you know, just to get that word count, so that when it's all over, said and done, you have something to work with for your first round of edits.
Yeah, I think also it can be just an understanding that there are going to be some days that the words flow and they're good and they turn out better than you expected. And then there's, just to hit that word count, there might be days where it's kind of just a brain dump and you're kind of plotting or thinking through a scene or trying something out and experimenting, and it might not be very good. But I think as long as you're trying to head in the right direction of the actual story you're trying to tell, then you're in a good space. So we did have a specific question for Rhiannon. Katrina says, how do you come up with your story ideas?
Oh, it depends. Some of them come from like one entire series came from Stevie Nicks' song. And then, you know, sometimes I'm just staring off into space and I happen to see, you know, an ambulance drive by, and that gives me an idea. There's no rhyme or reason that I found to it.
That sounds accurate. Okay, so P has a question for the panel. Do you work off of outlines or do you just wing it? Let's just let everybody kind of answer this. Melissa, if you want to start, and then we can go Lisa and Rhiannon.
Well, absolutely outlines, full on plots. I mean, this is my plotting wall here. I have an entire wall covered in sticky notes. I thank you, Sarah, for that. I was inspired, but absolutely, because my time is so limited because I do work full time, that I only have a couple of hours a day during the week to write. So I have to know exactly what I'm writing when I sit down. So my story is plotted out before Nano starts.
I started out as a pantser, all the way pantser, just writing for joy and, you know, figuring out as I went. And as each year has gone through, and after I won once, I sort of reassessed, and now I would call myself a plantser. I follow Save the Cat, and this year I'm doing a romance, so I've been working with Romancing the Beat and kind of integrating that. But I give myself a lot of freedom during Nano. You know, like I make a plan, and if I go off that plan, I don't give myself a hard time, you know?
I am, I guess, a plantser because I use Plotter and I definitely work out a pretty big outline, but I leave space in it for all the plot bunnies that live in the field next to my house.
Yeah, I think even if you're a plotter, it's good to leave that space too. Or if the story starts to go in a good direction that feels good, it's just understanding that it's okay to deviate and to keep moving forward. Although there are some people who, when they plot, that is what they stick to 100%. Melissa, is that the case for you? That it usually just goes the way expected, or does it usually go off?
there's times when I often joke that, my characters wander off into the bushes and I have to go after them. But I do leave that opening for that to happen. And I don't try to reel it back in. I just let it go and see what happens, because I have my plot, so I can, or my outline, and my plotting is all done, so I can always go back if I have to, right? If it turns out that it doesn't work.
Yeah. Okay, so Angel Faye writer says, this will be my first time taking part in NaNoWriMo. How was your first Nano? So I can start with an answer to this. Hopefully you guys are still seeing and hearing me fine. So my very first Nano, I had no idea what I was doing. I had never finished a novel before. I didn't really understand story structure other than just what we sort of intuitively know when you've been consuming stories most of your life. Like, oh yeah, there's going to be a bad guy and they're going to be following clues, or whatever. And in some ways that made my Nano easier than it has been in later years, because I was blissfully ignorant. But it was more lonely because I was scared to reach out to my local group. I was nervous to put myself out there and go meet people. But I did finish the 50K because I was just, whatever came to mind, I was going to put it down. But I will say that I never went back and edited that book because it was such a mess. I have no idea. But my husband, George, accidentally, he was rummaging through my stuff one day and he was like, oh, here's a story. It was in a file folder. And he was like, well, let me read this. And I came in one day and he was like, where's the rest of this? And I was like, what are you reading? And he's like, I don't know, the one where the guy eats the rabbit, because it was kind of like a horror movie. There's blood in this one. And I was like, no, that one doesn't have an ending. And there were almost tears in his eyes, because he was like, what do you mean there's no ending? I've just spent 2 hours reading this book. And I was like, I never finished that. And there are times when I think about going back to it, but there's something to be said for just exploring what you enjoy doing as a storyteller. So for your very first time, not trying to make it perfect and just whatever comes to mind, oh, here's an idea of a scene where they can have an argument, and just write that and let it flow, because you'll start to get your own sense of what you enjoy writing and how that feels. So Rhiannon, what was your first Nano like?
Actually, it was a whole mess. I was trying to finish a master's. I decided on some, I don't know, I'd like to say drunken night, but I wasn't. I just decided I was going to write a book, and that was going to be what I was going to do. I was also working part-time at a domestic violence shelter. Which meant that I went and did a 24-hour stint every weekend.
Wow.
At the shelter, working. And it was a mess. And by the end of it, I did have a book. I did not actually win Nano that year, I don't believe. I did finish the book later, though.
That's a lot going on in a month. Lisa, how was your very first one?
I was working at the Minnesota Orchestra, planning events, and I needed an outlet that wasn't my job. And so I started writing, lurking. Wasn't on any of the groups or forums or anything like that. But I wrote maybe 20,000 words that month, and I went back and finished it later. But it was really great. It was wonderful. It was very writing the story of your heart kind of thing, very free, the way you said that, Sarah, where you were just you don't know what you don't know. And, you're just doing it.
Blissful. How about you, Melissa?
So my first Nano was in 2019, and I was working full-time in a call center, taking calls for funeral homes. And I needed something, because every day was a bad day. So I needed something to lift me up. But like you, Sarah, I found it really, really lonely, because I didn't know, I wasn't in this community. I didn't know much about the Nano community. And I did finish the book. It was a hot mess, but it ended up spawning what I've got going on now. So that was a good thing. But yeah, I burnt myself out. I completely burnt myself out because I would stay up until midnight to get my word count in. And then I would have to get up and go to that very stressful job in the morning. So I don't suggest that anybody follows in my footsteps on that one, for sure.
Yeah, and part of the thing too to remember, if you find yourself halfway through Nano and you just are struggling to get that word count in, just remember, like, we've got a lot of people here that have worked on books that didn't get finished 50K in the month of November, but they did eventually get finished. And now, years later, does it matter that it didn't get done by November 30th? No, it still got done by January or the next year or whatever. It still got finished eventually. So like burning yourself out to where you can't write for 6 months after you have to decide for yourself whether that's really worth it, but most of the time not going to be worth it unless you're trying to hit that pre-order, which I will never do again. Somebody slap me if I decide to set up a pre-order. So I know we've got a lot of more questions coming in, so I don't want to, we're probably not going to make it to everyone, but I do like this comment here. And I wonder if it was Melissa that said this, the worst thing you ever wrote is better than the best thing you never wrote. So that is so true. It's like just getting the words on the page and trying not to judge it. So Victoria had asked, how do you block out that audience or not be too critical when you're editing? Anybody want to field that question?
I still struggle with that, so I'm going to let y'all.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Still struggle with it. But I guess it all just kind of comes down to, what do you need to have happen? Right. And it's finding what works best for you as far as blocking out the negativity that may come with your editing. It's like they say, you can't edit an empty page. The first draft is supposed to be a dumpster fire. Mm-hmm. So let it be, because you can always edit it.
And you know what? Sometimes you're going to feel like it's a dumpster fire, but then when you go back to edit it, you'll be like, wow, some of this is actually really good. So sometimes that in the moment perspective is not always true. So too, I'm going to skip forward because there's a ton of comments since I started doing questions. So if we skipped your question, feel free to put it back in the chat a little bit later. It will not be seen if I'm skipping it now, so feel free to add it back in. Beatrice says, what do you do when you're stuck and you can't figure a scene out? This is a tough one.
I always play Choose Your Adventure. That's my first thing. Like, I loved those books when I was a kid, and then I just like step away, pull out like multiple pieces of paper, and I say, okay, what are all the different options that I could go to? Which one's going to be a dead end and which one's going to be the, twist? And, I just try to make it fun. Yeah. Doesn't always work. Sometimes it's wonderful though. So,
yeah. Anybody else have a tip there?
I mean, mine's pretty much the same. I just call it the what if game. So what if they jump off a cliff instead of going down this alley? What if they, dump this guy and find something better? Whatever. I tend to make it crazy things just to get stuff going.
I write ahead.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I'll just like you do, Sarah. I'll put in, they do something cool here, and then skip to the next scene, right? So that I don't stop the flow.
Yep. I will often do that. I'll jump to what's the next thing I do know. What's the next piece that I can see in my mind, whether it's just a small piece of like, she's in the bedroom exploring something, like, okay, that didn't sound right. I just had this scene in my head of like, she's in someone else's bedroom, like searching like through her drawers. That did not, just scratch that entire conversation. So let's use a different scene. We could say that she's in the woods following a noise or something like that. And it's like that, I know that's going to happen. So let me see if I can work my way backwards from that. Is there anything that needs to happen before that scene? And if I can't figure it out, then I'll just jump straight to that next scene. And that sometimes will shake something loose. Like, oh yeah, well, before she can discover this, she needs to actually know there's the woods behind his house are important. So I'm going to set that scene up a little bit. Okay, so the XXXX says tips for someone that does nano while traveling. I'm going to be doing a little bit of traveling myself this year because literally the 3rd through the 6th, I will be going to Houston. And it's tough to keep it up while traveling. I think that part of the key is thinking ahead. What's my schedule going to be like, and where can I grab the time to get those 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever many sprints that you need in? Because before you know it, the time is gone and it's too late at night to get those words in. So pre-planning, like, okay, we're going to stop on the road, or I'm going to be at the airport for this amount of time. I'm going to try to get these in, and just trying to be disciplined about doing it when you're supposed to do it. But also, again, making sure you're not burning yourself out. Does anybody else have a tip on traveling?
I do. One thing that I try to do is, like, in the time leading up to my trip, to try to get in as much writing as I can then, without, of course, burning myself out, but to get ahead, so that if you end up having to miss a day or, whatever, then that's okay, because you've got that buffer. I like to try to have a buffer.
Yeah. Jody says, how do you give yourself grace when you get behind? The panel says, I don't know.
I've had this happen multiple times, and some years I'm better at it than others. The second camp nano that I did, my goal was hours sitting and writing instead of words. For camp, you can set your own goals. And I won that, and it was just 2 hours a day. I just want to write 2 hours a day. I'm not going to worry about how productive I am. And so if I'm behind, I shift to that mindset. So I just think, okay, I'm just going to make this amount of time productive. I can't control what happened before. I don't know what's happening next. I've got these 2 hours, and I'm just going to write. And that tends to help. I also talk to my friends and say, but yeah, you're not alone. And so many people are there. So I think that's,
Yeah. And I think too, just similar to what I said in my video this Thursday, is it's really up to you to decide what it means about you if you're behind. And the truth is, NaNoWriMo doesn't mean anything about you as a person and your worth as a person or as a writer. And whether or not you hit 50K in a month doesn't mean anything about who you are, right? It's just a fun game that we're playing. And so if you can try to just not make it mean anything about you, like, I know that sounds so simplistic, but just to say, oh, notice it. Okay, I'm behind. And sometimes it can be more of a disappointment of, but I really wanted to finish this book. This was so important to me. But just understanding that, this doesn't actually mean anything about my quality of writing or my discipline. It just means, man, this was a tough month, and it's going to be okay. And I'll finish this book just on a different timeline. Okay, here's a good question. Nikki says, what writing software do each of you use, and what do you like most about it? So Rhiannon, if you want to start, and then we can go around.
I love Plotter. It's for plotting, but it's also becoming my series Bible at this point, because I can keep everything in there and just refer back to it all the time, forever. Like I'm about to, for Nano, start writing 2 novellas out of a series that I finished, and I've written 2 books since that. But I can just go back and refer to the books in that series, and the plots that I have are already done. They're in that same series. So I can just switch tabs all day long and be able to check things. And then Scrivener. Because Scrivener.
Yeah. So Plotter is not actually you can't write in Plotter, right? But you can connect it to your Scrivener, and you can do all your plotting in Plotter. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Lisa?
I have almost always used Scrivener. This Nano is a little unusual for me because I'm going to be traveling, so I'm going to be doing kind of a Scrivener Google Docs mix, just around Thanksgiving, going to see, just traveling around Thanksgiving. But and I'm also getting a new computer, so I'm going to be working on Plotter. I got it. I just haven't figured it out yet, but that's probably going to wait until after Nano.
Yeah.
I almost always used Word just because it was there, and it got kind of messy getting it like back and forth between myself and my editor. And I hate track changes in Word. It was always malfunctioning. So I switched over to actually using Google Docs. I have Scrivener. I just haven't taken the opportunity to sit down and learn how to use it. But I like Google Docs because my beta readers can kind of come in behind me and read as I'm writing. So this book is being written in Google Docs.
Yeah, and I will give a quick tip about Google Docs, because I know many of you know that I write in Google Docs, is that once you get, it can depend, but once you get 30,000 words or so in your novel, a lot of times Google Docs will slow down. And so you'll be typing, but the letters are coming out a little bit later than your fingers. And so one of the tricks that I have learned with that, if you're coming across that, is you can exit out into the main docs. Like, don't go just to that one doc, but to the main Google Docs homepage that lists all your documents, and refresh it, and then go back into your doc, and it'll speed up again for a long time, like another 20,000 words. And another thing, if it's just bothering you and it keeps happening, is to split your draft. Say, I'm going to go to 25,000, and then I'm going to do a part 2 and go to 25K. But that's probably the biggest complaint about Google Docs, but I do love it. All right, we have a actual writing question here. How are we feeling about including a prologue and or flashbacks? So my book that I'm working on, The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw, has both. It begins with a prologue that is basically a flashback. It's 1 year ago. This is the inciting incident moment. And then throughout the entire novel, there are flashbacks. There are actually 3 timelines in this particular book. So you've got the current day, you've got 1 year ago when Vanessa disappeared, and then you also have the summer before that on a different timeline. And I think it's just all in the passion and the handling of it. I know that some people say, well, readers don't read prologues, or whatever, but I have done prologues in a lot of my books, and my readers seem to read them, and people seem to enjoy them. And sometimes it's just necessary when you have an event that happens before to do a flashback. And I think it's fine. It's just a matter of using them strategically and making sure that that flashback has a purpose, that we needed to see that, instead of it could have just been a conversation. Remember that time when? It's like, why are you showing it, and what is it revealing about what's going on? Anyone else have a different opinion or want to add to that?
I love prologues.
Yeah, me too.
In the book that I had published 2 years ago, my prologue was actually the 2 main characters, and it was written in each of them in the first person, whereas the rest of the book was written in the third person. But people really liked that because they said it was like they were in their heads, Yeah. And I do know with this book that I'm writing now, there will be flashbacks. Dealing with 500-year-old demons, there's going to be flashbacks. So
I think as long as you can make the timeline clear, that's the main thing I'm kind of struggling with, is like, okay, you can put 1 year ago, but then you have to make sure people's eyes get on that and they can really remember, okay, like you got to give them something in the beginning to ground them in where are we and what timeline are we in. And that's a little bit of a challenge. So, all right. Scylla Grand says, how do you keep up the motivation and not lose steam while you're drafting? Rhiannon?
Sometimes I have to get out of my head and into my body, and I use yoga. It's moving meditation for me, and I can go for however long it takes, because it's not an aerobic exercise, so I'm not killing myself, and it's still good for me. It helps my back and hips and everything that we mess up while we're sitting here for hours writing, and that just, I don't know, it helps me.
Does anybody else have a good tip on that?
Hot shower. Muses thrive in the shower. We all know that, right?
So true. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Very
I think too, just to give a shout out to our community, if anybody is watching here that isn't part of the Heart Breathings writing community, it's over 5,000 people now in a Facebook group, but we also do things here on YouTube if you're not in Facebook. And there are writing sprints. I saw Tracy in the comments. I saw Angela in the comments. Maybe Jen is here. I didn't see yet, but we may have some more of our admins here. We have a large group of wonderful admins who run writing sprints every single day, not all day, every day, but every single day we're running sprints. And that having that community can help you not lose steam, because it's that, okay, Lisa's on live tonight, I'm going to show up. And then once you get there, maybe you dragged yourself like kicking and screaming, but once you're on, it's fun and there's community and we're joking and it's, okay, I got 20 minutes to focus, and that can help so much. So come join us. And I had some people asking, how do I join a sprint? Really, all you have to do is exactly what you've done here to come join the live stream. There's a Google Calendar. There's a link down below to my website, and there's a Google Calendar, and it lists all the times and links to everybody's channel. And you just find one that works at a time that you can join in. You click in, you show up live, and you comment. And that's literally all you have to do. You don't have to register anywhere. You don't have to be in the Facebook group if you don't want. Super, super easy to join in. This is kind of fun too. Do you have a favorite Nano or Camp Nano memory?
No, I kind of melt my brain during that time. There's no memories.
I will say, my first Nano was very lonely. I was living by myself. My son had just moved out of the house, and I was all alone. When I finished Nano, it was like, I finished, and everything echoed in this big empty house. And then a week later, Ziggy came into my life. So that's my favorite Nano memory, was realizing, oh boy, I'm all alone, and then getting this beautiful little bundle of fur that just like makes my life so much better, right? So that's my favorite memory.
Oh, I love it. Lisa, did you have one to share?
Yeah, definitely. When I did Nano and my kids did the youth program the first year that we did homeschool, and it was so sweet to listen to them talk about the stories that they were shaping and stuff. And they actually did Nano, the youth program, on their own. They decided they wanted to do it, Sarah, after listening to The Witch's Key and hearing all of the stories like coming, the next year after that. They had all of their own ideas, and they had the books. I think we bought the books. I don't know if we had them in time for that Nano or not, but they have their books in their own, So, getting to like share that with other people. And then close second is the first year that I won with the Heart Breathings group, because that was just exciting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. That means a lot to me. One of my favorite Nano memories is that that second Nano that I did, I finally decided that I was going to try to get involved with the local group. I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time, which I wish kind of I still did, because then I'd have more friends there even than now, right, Rhiannon? But one of my very best friends I met through that second Nano, JD Robinson, Jen, and we were just reminiscing how it's been 14 years since we met and did that first Nano. And it's just like, oh my gosh, how crazy to meet a friend that is a writer friend basically for life. I love it. And Diane is here too. So this is another one of our admins that sprints. So if I've missed anybody else, I'm sure I'll see you as I'm scrolling through. It's such an amazing community, you guys. So come join us. Tracy, I saw in the comments. So I'll just mention to you guys, on the 15th, we're going to do another live Q&A, and we'll have some other of our admins like Tracy joining us for that one to kind of give a boost of like, what do I do if I'm stuck and that kind of thing. But Tracy was saying one of the things she does is reverse NaNo, where you start out with a really high word count so that by the time you get to day 30, you only need a handful of words. And that can be a good thing too. And if you go to a site called Pacemaker, I think it's just pacemaker.com, but you can search Pacemaker for writers and it will come up. You can actually create your own writing plan based on whether you want to go high. You know, if you say, I want to start out big, then it will create a daily plan for you. So that's kind of neat too.
Nice.
Okay, let me see if I can find another good question. Okay, so Angel says, have you ever formatted your book? And if so, do you have any tips on how to do it? For NaNo, I'm writing for the first time a fantasy in a serial mode. So yeah, so formatting, you know, you really don't need to worry about that when you're drafting, but once you decide you want to publish it or you want to send it off, the formatting is so important. And, you know, if you're going to publish and you want to publish often, it's so good to buy something like Vellum is something that's for, is it still only for Mac, Vellum? I think it is at the moment. And then Atticus is another version that is available for PC. And that will save you so much time and energy. You can do it inside Scrivener, but you have to really follow some tutorials and it's going to be a little bit of a hassle. And then you can do it also in Word. And there, it depends if you're doing your ebook or if you're doing a PDF for your paperback, but I think probably that is going to be too difficult of a question for us to answer quickly, just because formatting is like a pretty huge thing. But I know that if you search for like Bethany Adazada, she has a couple of like formatting things. Maybe Mandy Lynn does too. But we can circle around to that if we have more time, unless anybody has any other like quick tips on that. I feel like it's kind of a big topic.
For ebooks, you can also do it in draft to digital.
Right.
Really simple, easy, upload a Word doc, 2-3 steps. Also as well, no, carry on. I just lost it.
If you're just going to Kindle, also Kindle has its own software called Kindle Create. That's why I'm saying it's kind of a big topic because there's so many options for how to format. But there are free ways to do it and there are paid ways to do it. Salome asks, how do you switch to your other timeline? Like if you're not in the protagonist's point of view, so it's still cohesive. So basically you're asking like if you're switching from like a protagonist to your antagonist or something like that, or to a different flashback or something like that. You know, personally, like I said, for me, I feel like it's a matter of some kind of header, first of all, so you alert the reader right away that says, okay, we're in a different point of view here. And we're, and you'll see some writers like Stephen King and some fantasy stuff, they won't even tell you what POV we're switching to, but they'll start the first paragraph right away with someone saying the character's name, or with it being very heavily anchored into, oh, well, this is obviously Lisa because we're sitting at the desk writing a book, you know, and you have something right there. And I think to make it cohesive, a lot of times, it's so hard to put my mind to it exactly, but I switch point of views quite a lot because I have up to 8 points of view in my books. And so I like to bring in something that sort of carries on from the previous scene. So if one character is looking, it's kind of hard to explain, so I don't know that I'm making sense, but it's like if one character is looking out the window, I might also have the next character staring off into the distance. I don't do that every single time, but it's just sometimes if it feels like it needs that really easy transition, sometimes I'll have those scenes kind of mirror each other just a little bit. But I always make sure that I have a header there that tells me what timeline we're in, so it's just really clear in front of you. And then I also make sure that very first sentence anchors the reader into where we are, what's going on, and what's the character. Because if it takes them half the page to figure out whose point of view we're in or where we are and what's going on, then you're already confusing them. Does anybody else have a cohesive timeline switch tip?
No,
I do the same thing you do. Yeah.
how do you decide tense, past or present? Rhiannon, you want to start?
I write present tense because that's how I do. And I get really, really disgusted with the editing process of trying to eliminate passive voice. And it just ticks me off. So I'd rather write in present tense.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, did you have something to say there too?
Yeah, well, for my pen name, I write in first person present tense. And it wasn't really a decision that I made. It was just the story made more sense. It was a little more of an immersive read to read it in the present tense. And like the stuff that I'm writing now is all in past tense. Again, more of an immersive read given the type of story that it is.
Mm-hmm. All right. There's so many comments, you guys. It's hard to make sure that I'm kind of bouncing around to get everybody's stuff. So, okay. So Ulrika says, does it happen that you start writing from scratch, or do you struggle with the same story even if you run out of ideas? So I think basically what she's saying is, if you're starting with a brand new story and you get stuck, do you stick with that same story no matter what, or do you what do you do if you run out of ideas? So this is kind of similar to that, what happens if you get stuck kind of question. But maybe if anybody has any advice on whether you should swap stories if you get stuck.
The first time that I won, I switched. I started the first week with a different story, but it was too serious and it was just like mentally kind of heavy to write. So I switched and it worked. I think it really depends on your situation. I'm sorry to say that. I know that's such a wishy-washy thing to say, but I think it depends on what it is that's getting you stuck.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think sometimes too, it can also be what is your history? Because if you just always start a story from scratch, and as soon as it gets tough and you can't figure it out, you just move to a new story, and you're perpetually like you're a serial story starter and you never finish anything, I would highly recommend that you try to just take some of the tips that we gave earlier. Start thinking of what else can happen right ahead in the story. Just do a what if. Start, trying to make it a commitment that I am going to finish this story, whether it sucks and it's the worst story I ever wrote. I'm going to try to finish it, because there is a magic to sticking to one story and finishing it and proving to yourself that you can do it. But sometimes you do need to switch too. So there's clear as mud for you. All right. So Sarah, the late night coffee mom, which I love, says, a question asked earlier, but just in case, I'm coaching a group of high schoolers through their first Young Writers Nano. What advice would a teenage version of you have benefited from during your first Nano? Lisa, do you have some tips on this?
Yes. The biggest thing for my kids was when I gave too much advice, then they would just freeze and feel pressure. So I would always, every time that they would stuck, I would just try to draw out, like, tell me more about the things that you really like. Tell me about this part that's like, doesn't make sense to you. What do you think are the options? Like just trying to do things to inspire their internal voice and to build up their confidence.
Yeah, I love that. Anybody else have a young writer's tip?
I do.
Okay.
Go ahead and write it, even if you can't show it to anybody.
That's good. That's good.
Haters.
You're talking about my life right now. I'm not English, so
right. And haters are going to hate. It doesn't matter. They don't matter. It's your story. Tell it like it needs to be told.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes the haters are your family, and
it's hard.
If you got to hide it, write it anyways.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to just get it out.
Yep.
Sometimes you need to express yourself in that way, and it's okay to do it. and just don't let anybody read it. I like it. I like it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Instagram real quick. Alicia says, I have procrastinated my outlining. I have done 2 chapters. How can I finish my outline in one day? Woo! Any good tips for fast outlining?
Stream of consciousness writing. Just, whether you write faster by hand or keyboard or whatever, just blast it out. Just blast it out. That's, that's what I would be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Sparsity. Just know where your end is going to be, and have the absolute roughest possible sketch of where things are kind of going, and fill it in from there as you write.
Cross your fingers and pray.
Yes, lots of that.
When I'm stuck, I always go to like favorite movies and favorite books. And I look at, what point in the story did they do this? Or like, I love to go back to Nora Roberts' books when she'll have like a series of family members that are related or friends. And in this book, this little thing happened about 2/3 the way through or whatever. Oh yeah. I wonder if I could think of something that's kind of like, clearly not copying. I'm not saying that, but like, just looking at what other people have done that you loved,
Yep, I love that. And I think too, trying to pick a buddy and saying, will you bounce some ideas with me? Because sometimes just going through it in our head alone is just like a hamster on a wheel. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But sometimes just being able to verbalize it and have someone say, well, what if they did this? You could be like, well, that story idea is terrible, but it just gave me another one. That's kind of what happens with me and my husband. He'll be like, why don't they just do this? And I'll be like, definitely not, but that gives me another idea. So that can always go well.
One of my kids this year for Halloween didn't know what they wanted to be, and so they asked their friends. They did a poll with their friends, and their friends picked stuff, and they were like, nope, I want to do the other one. Like it was like, I want to know how I respond to what other people suggest, and then I'll know what I really want.
It's okay. It's okay. Sometimes it's just your jumping off point, right? And I also would just say, if you're sitting here like this and you feel like, oh my gosh, what if I don't have a great outline ready to go? You can still start writing. It doesn't have to be perfect to get going. Rana says, how do we track for Nano, or how can we track when we're editing? Does anyone have experience editing during Nano? Renee just says, I tried to do it last year and couldn't do it, so I stopped. Super encouraging. I love you, Renee.
I think it'd be more of a time spent than a word count.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do. I've not done it for Nano, but that's what I would probably do. Keep track of time.
Yeah. And to be honest, I usually will just go with word count too. Even if it's not new words, it's words that I edited. So if it's, if I'm starting with a 0 draft, nothing in my Google Doc, and I add 1,000 words and I edit it, counts as 1,000 words. It's kind of cheating if you want to see it that way, because it's like you can maybe get those 1,000, but sometimes it takes me just as long to edit, or even longer to edit 1,000 words than it did to write them originally. So that's just the way I do it. And I feel like it eventually evens out, and I still end up writing quite a bit. So I would say you could just simplify it if you want and say 1,000 words edited equals 1,000 words for Nano. And no one is coming to your house to tell you that you can't do it that way. There's a comment from suggestions here from Sam, says, for planning, I've been saying 1 TB or half an hour, 1 task block equals 250 words. So you could do like that amount of time for the equals of 50K. That's a really good idea too. So that's kind of like Melissa said, using your time. All right, let's see what else we've got here. There's so many good comments here. And I love how everybody has, everybody so far has just really good, different suggestions. It makes me happy. Naming characters is the bane of my life. Other than thumbing through a baby book, how do you find your names? Good question, Nikki.
Is it 10,000babynames.com? I think that's what the website is. It's my go-to.
This last book, my characters are really, really old, so I looked up ancient names. So I got some really weird stuff in there.
Can't wait to read it.
I love Easter eggs. So while I'm doing my research and like my theme for each of the characters, like what makes them who they are, a lot of times I'll come across a person or a reference in history, and I'll find ways to have a portion of the name, or, you know.
For some reason, I often will just be like, I need a good J name. You know, I'll look around. I've got this guy's got an R name and this guy's got a B name. I need something that's different than that. I'm just going to go with an M, you know, and I'll just think whatever's the first M name, which is just like not at all like a scholarly way to do it. So just do whatever you want and it will all work. Okay, let's see. So Kelly says, this was asked earlier, but just in case, I'm coaching. Oh, no, we did answer that one. Yep. Okay, so let's see. Diane says, please share how you plot. Do you do characters or story first? Also, what about your plotting notebooks or story Bibles? So Rhiannon already kind of gave us an insider's tip about her story Bible kind of in Plotter, which I love. But just curious, do you start with characters or story first when you start thinking of your stories?
Story, actually, which is weird because my books are pretty character driven, but it's not the characters that come into my brain when I am figuring out the story initially. It's some weird storyline that I really got to work on.
Lisa, how about you?
I have found that I have to settle on the theme of the books. So it's not even really like story specifically, it's theme. And then I select characters that can play around that theme. And then I move into story.
Very interesting. How about you, Melissa?
Kind of the same as Lisa. It usually starts with I'm watching television or something, and I'm like, this is a really good plot, but what if everybody was a demon? Right? And then it's like, blam, and then the characters start coming in. But so it's usually the story first for me as well.
Yeah, I often will start with just a scene. And it's no surprise that it's very visual for me, that I'll see something and it's just a tiny snippet of an action. And then I'll be like, who is this character and what is their story? So then it sort of blossoms out of that for me. So sort of neither and both at the same time. Michelle says, do you have to follow the POV of the genre you're writing in? So, I mean, if you are planning to indie publish, you don't have to do anything, right? That's part of the beauty of it. But should you is a different question, right? And I think it really comes down to what are the reader expectations of this genre and why. So, for example, if you have a specific genre of romance or subgenre of romance where almost every book you pick up is first person present tense, it's usually like that because the reader likes that immediacy of feeling like they're in the story, it's happening to them right now, and they can place themselves in that position. And so if you were to take them out of that and put them in third person past tense, it's going to feel strange to those readers, and it may not be as popular of a book in that specific subgenre because you're not, even if they can't put their fingers on why, they're not getting the feeling they were coming there to get. And so I think that it can matter in some genres, but you'll find other genres where you see a mix of it anyway. And so you just do what feels best for you. Like young adult fantasy, you might see third person, first person past, and first person present, and it can all work. So you just choose the one. So I think it depends on the genre. Does anybody disagree or have anything else there?
No.
No, I agree with that completely. But who is it that said know the rules so you can break them?
Yeah.
Right? The joys of being an indie author.
It's so true. So true. All right, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to find, I should have found this before I started. Before I started going, how do you find a buddy? So yeah, to my question, to buddy up with someone and start plotting. Does anybody have any suggestions on how to find a buddy?
There's the NaNo site. I mean, that's one way. Heart Breathings group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody in your own genre is usually helpful, for sure.
The NaNo Discord, I think there are local Discords usually. If you're looking for somebody local that you could actually like meet up and write with and that sort of thing. But I mean, most of my buddies are from sprinting together, you know, and hearing people make comments or things that I can relate to. And then I'm like, I wonder, you know, I haven't gotten to the point yet where I'm trading words with people, but I have people in my mind that I'm like, you know what? I think they might understand what I'm doing. I don't want to send it to somebody who's like, I just don't get you. Right.
Yeah, definitely from the sprints. That's where I met basically all of you people who I adore, and I talk through a lot of stuff with you guys, whether or not you realize that I'm talking about stories at the time. So
so I think, yeah, just lean on the resources that are out there and know that you're not alone. Like there's this group, there's the NaNo sites, there's like, I have a Discord server. I don't know if I've linked it down below, but if you go to my other YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Sarra Cannon, I know my Discord server is there, and we have a specific channel that's just for buddying up. And so there's tons of places, and I think that it can be super helpful. Yeah, like Alicia says, most of my buddies come from sprinting. What are you guys laughing about? Now I don't know. Renee makes a mental note to read between the lines of everything Rhiannon says. Oh, I love it. And this is so true. It's like just getting involved in the community, and then you start to talk to people just naturally, like we're doing here. And then you start to say, oh, you know, this is a fun person. I enjoy talking to them, or they seem to be writing the same thing I am. And don't be afraid to reach out, because especially in our community, like I have not encountered anybody that has been rude or has been anything less than like lovely and happy to help. Jen says, can we just keep going? I have another hour. we can probably answer a couple more things. I think this has been so good. So we I feel like maybe we answered this a little bit, but I do think we could go a little bit into more detail on it. But how do you brutally turn off your internal critic? Currently outlining my skeleton outline, and it's nagging me that it ain't good. It's really a tough one. And I feel like we kind of danced around it, but we didn't specifically talk about turning off that inner critic. Does anybody have any good tips? Diane says, just tell it to shut the heck up.
I choose to think of my inner critic as somebody who's trying to protect me from, you know, embarrassment or whatever. And I literally visualize my inner critic as a stressed out person that needs to go have a spa day or something like that. And I just say, thank you for trying to, you know, take good care of me, but I don't need you today. You go on. And then I literally try to separate it myself from it that way. I don't know if that is just wild or or if anybody can relate, but because it really is the part of myself that's just afraid, you know what I mean? So, and I just try to have compassion for my scared self.
I don't know if any of you are familiar with Maureen Johnson, but she's a young adult author. She's fantastic. And she was active in NaNo. I don't know if she still is, when I was first starting out as a writer. And she said, give yourself permission to suck. And that was helpful, because it was like, oh, I have permission for it to be terrible. And so whenever my inner critic comes up and says, well, this is the worst thing you've ever written, I sometimes will even write that into my document. I'll write XX, just to note that I'm making a mental note to myself, and I'll say, this is the worst thing you've ever written and you're a terrible writer. Okay, let's keep going. And I'll just say, I have permission for it to be the worst thing I've ever written. So there, you know, and that's the way it's going to be. And that does help me a lot. Does anybody else have an inner critic tip?
I'm the exact opposite of Lisa. I love how Lisa's so polite to her inner critic. I look at my inner critic as somebody who's trying to stop me from achieving my dreams. So they can just go sit in the corner and just because I'm going to be blocking them out. I'm going to be blocking them out. Right, exactly.
Well, first of all, congratulations to Inca, who has just recently published. So very, very proud of you, Inca. My inner critic is called Barbara, which I love because I have a really mean Aunt Barbara. And I just yell at her, get a life, Barbara. I can write trash if I want. So maybe just name your inner critic, give it a name and yell at it.
So good.
Oh, such a good one. Such a good one. Okay. So we are officially at the hour. So I think it would be good if we just go around and everybody give one final tip or message of encouragement or anything somebody had asked. If you want a prompt, someone had said, like, what do you feel like are your tips or things you have learned after going through multiple nanos, or you can just give any tips that you want.
I didn't study for this.
I warned you I might put you under pressure a little bit today. You don't have to start, Rhiannon. We can make Melissa start.
Yeah.
The best piece of advice that I can give you is if it gets hard and you're burning out, stop. It's not the end all and be all, right? You're supposed to be having fun. If you're not having fun, what's the sense in doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Have fun with it.
Yep. I was going to say, if you get stuck or you're just feeling super down, come and have a lurking sprint with us, or just hang out and say, I'm having a rough one. I'm just going to hang out with y'all. And there's plenty of us who can relate and will cheer you on. So yeah, just have fun. Just, and if you're feeling crappy and you're not having fun, don't beat yourself up over it. Like, don't be mean to yourself if you're having a hard day. Just let it be. You know, it's all good.
Maggie.
Maggie.
Even if you fail, it's just an opportunity to start over again, knowing a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And my final moment, first of all, I loved this comment and I wanted to pull this up. Haley says, I adore that this group is filled with cheerleaders. And that is definitely what you will find in the Heart Breathings writing community. And I mention it because it was originally just a group that I created to do a word sprint challenge. It was supposed to be a 5-day group. Literally, this is like the story of my life, because I'm like, oh, this is just going to be a trilogy, you know? And now it's 12 books in a decade of my life. And it's the same thing. It was just supposed to be a 5-day challenge group to find your best writing sprints time. And it turned into, well, let's keep the group open. And then it turned into, let's do some live writing sprints. And now it's this whole group. And you guys, we are thinking of planning a in-person retreat potentially next year here in the Dallas area. So put that, you know, in the back of your mind if you think you want a fun actual writing event, not a conference where you got to learn business stuff, but like a writing event with a bunch of people. If you want to join, Sonia, the group is linked. Oops, wrong one. The group is linked down below. There's a Facebook group, but there's also a Kelly. There's also a Facebook page or a page on my website that has a link to the Facebook group. It has all the times that we sprint. It has a Google Calendar that has all the sprints. And that is totally how you can come to join us. Kelly knows me. Sarah doesn't write trilogies. She writes trilogies of trilogies, which is so accurate. But really and truly, my best advice to you is find that group of people that are going to cheer you on, and don't just know that you're never alone in this. Every writer who writes, whether it's during Nano or any other time, has moments where they feel like, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I'm the worst writer. I don't deserve this. Like any number or combination of those types of self-doubt thoughts, because what you're doing is difficult. And there's no way to know if you're doing a good job or not until you start letting other people read your stuff, which is a vulnerable thing. And so when you're in the trenches of drafting, it's like, I don't have any feedback coming in on whether this is any good other than the feedback that's coming through my own brain, which often is scared, like Lisa said. And so really and truly understand that you're not alone, that everybody feels that way. Everybody has moments where they get stuck. Everybody has moments of doubt. But if you are showing up for yourself and if you have the inspiration to put a story down on paper, then you were meant to. And your voice matters, and what you have to say makes a difference. And so try to remember when you sit down, even if you feel like this is not my best, that your voice matters, and what you have to say in the world is unique to you, and no one else can tell that story the way that you can. And so believe in yourself, know you're not alone, and just keep trying. Just keep sitting down and moving forward. You got this. All right, you guys, thank you all so much. First of all, to my beautiful friends who joined me today. Y'all, please go and follow them on YouTube here so that you can come join us. There are lots of other admins too, and all of our YouTube channels are linked over in my website at heartbreathings.com. It's linked in the description box. And you can add that Google Calendar to your own Google Calendar, and it will remind you when the sprints are coming up. And all you have to do is just show up. You don't even have to comment if you don't want to at first. And come join us, and we'll have those timers going for you. And you can always check out ones that are replays as well. They stay up on our channels. But thank you all for being a part of this. And thank you all for coming. We had about 250 to 300 people here the whole time, which is just incredible. That is amazing. I love you guys. So come join us. We start, tomorrow's Halloween, and then we start Nano on Tuesday. So best wishes to everybody, and we will see you in the thick of it. All right. Bye, everybody.